What does artificial intelligence, AI, know about rifle cartridges and hunting? Well, according to some of you, not much. We're going to cover what our recent podcast or video on AI chosen cartridges actually did and why it was wrong. You guys had all the right answers. That's coming up on this episode of Ron Spomer Outdoors Podcast. Well, artificial intelligence is apparently quite artificial. According to most of you who watched our episode on overrated cartridges from AI, we asked AI what the 5 most overrated cartridges were. And they came up with some pretty crazy ideas, such as the 30-06 was overrated and the 223 Remington was overrated. Wow, that generated a lot of responses from you guys, and here are some of those. Moore Cave said, my 270 recoils harder than my 300 Winchester Magnum. Guess what? AI didn't like the 300 Win Mag either, said it was overrated. So Moorcav didn't much agree with that. Now, Aaron O'Connor said that the only AI you need is Ackley improved. Now, we heard from several people about that one, and it was pretty clever. AI has long been used for standing for Ackley improved cartridges, like the 280 Ackley improved, which is really quite popular and quite an outstanding centerfire rifle cartridge in 7mm. So a lot of folks said that's the right AI that you should reference when you're talking about cartridges. Blue Bow Lame said 3030 is an antique round. Well, a lot of people think that, and technically it's true because it came out in 1895, and that's a long time ago. So, yeah, it would be an antique. And then Barry Manti agreed with AI and said the 3030 is a garbage cartridge. But Ishmael 7431 has a slightly different take. He says, yeah, AI seems to mean artificial idiocy in this case. I have seen several articles stating that the 3030 is marginal on whitetails, while articles in the same publication state that the 44 Magnum is adequate for brown bear. It is true that the 3030 is limited in its range, but most medium game is taken at less than 200 yards. As for the 30-06, yeah, it does have its limits, just like any other cartridge. But it will still take down everything short of elephants and rhinos at any range that a responsible hunter would attempt for a clean kill. Well, I'll throw one caveat on that one, Ishmael, and that is that the 30-06 will take down elephants and rhinos. At least it has historically. Ernest Hemingway took a rhino at quite a distance while it was running, and he used a 30-06. And I cannot cite anyone in particular who used a 30-06 on elephant, but I have heard many times that it was used successfully, which doesn't surprise me at all because, of course, Karamojo Bell was using a 757 Mauser, which is weaker in energy than the 30-06. And he took 800 elephants with that thing. So applying the same brain shots with a full patch or full metal jacketed bullet from a 30-06 should certainly do the same, if not better. So that really increases the fame and versatility of the 30-06. And of course, artificial intelligence, as many of you pointed out, is kind of an amalgam of human intelligence developed over the years. It does research and stores data unlike any human really can because you've got these huge banks of memory to store all this stuff up. So it gets information from books and magazine articles and conversations and videos and TV shows and history and military history and all sorts of things. It collects everything about the 30-06, for instance, and then it can very quickly access that information to come up with some average ideas or the preponderance of opinions based on that data. So it's really regurgitating what it has learned from what we have learned. It just compiles it faster than we can. So there's some validity to it, but you have to use it, I think, with a few grains of salt. But it's interesting to see what that machinery does and or can do. And I've got to say, and it's pretty obvious for all of you who've listened to me for any amount of time here, I am certainly not a computer expert or an artificial intelligence expert. I can barely handle my intelligence.
Absolutely.
See, there you go. But hey, I'm happy with it. I'm having fun. I don't need AI, but I guess in the future, a lot of us are going to be dealing with it in one way or another. So get ready. Oh, here's one, another one on the 30-30. This is from Dave Eggstrom. He says, in brushy forests where one can't see more than 40 or 50 yards, a 30-30 with open sights is far faster than any rifle with a scope. 2 to 3 seconds? Heck, you can't do that with optics. I still use an open-sighted 30-30. You know, Dave, a lot of people have said that for a long, long time. They were saying that when I was a kid, and I bought my first deer hunting rifle, Model 94 Winchester, 30-30, open sights. Shot my first deer as it was running left to right in front of me, full speed. So I obviously got on my target pretty quickly, but that was when I had 16-year-old eyeballs, not 70-plus-year-old eyeballs. And my argument today would be that at least I can get on my targets in 30, 40-yard wooded cover much more quickly with a scope. And I would argue that almost everyone and anyone can, just because with a scope, you do not have to focus your eye on a front sight and the target and a rear sight. Obviously, you can't, no human can do that. Even when you have the flexibility of young eyes, you've got to pick one or the other. You can come pretty close to having the front sight and the target in focus, whereas the rear sight is a little fuzzy, and that's kind of the key for open sight shooting. You have a fuzzy back notch that you're looking through, a nice sharp front sight, and then a slightly out of focus target usually is good enough to get your shot in there. But lining all those things up for me is a bit of a challenge. If your rifle fits you perfectly and you're really trained well with it, you should be able to throw it up and automatically be looking right down those open sights. But with a lot of rifles that I try, I've got to spend a little bit of time getting that front post in that rear notch. Peep sights make it a little faster. But what I find with scopes is because the scope focuses the image of the target onto the reticle, and the diopter ring at the eyepiece of the scope focuses your eye perfectly on the reticle. All those things, all the sight pieces, the rear, the front, and the target, they are all on the same focal plane. They're all sharp, a little bit enlarged. And for me, when I throw the scope up at 2x or even 4x on a deer that's 20 yards away, I instantly find him. Again, the rifle needs to fit me. I don't want to be hunting around for that scope. But I think I hear from dedicated open sight shooters who are really good with it that that's the best system because they haven't put the time into developing the technique with a scope that they did with their open sights. You guys might want to try this yourself. When I was, again, that kid shooting open sights, I got to the point where I wanted to reach out a little. I was hunting red fox for the fur back in the 70s when they were worth a lot of money. And I needed to reach out a little further than that 30-30 would in the wide open fields and pastures where I was hunting. And I eventually had to admit that I needed a rifle scope to do that. You got precision shooting at range, you just can't do it with open sights. But if you are good with your open sights, whether they're the typical buckhorn or even an express sight or a peep sight, go ahead and stick with it if it's working for you. But if you really want to improve and increase your ability to reach out a little bit farther, do give scopes a try. The lower powers especially should work out pretty well for you pretty quickly. And then as you become more and more adept and you have that rifle and scope setup fitting you, you should be able to throw that to your face and get a shot off as quickly as you do with open sights, if not more quickly. Give it a try and let me know what happens. All right, now, a lot of people were commenting on something we did on the 8.6 Blackout subsonic load. Again, this is the one that shoots 300 and even 350 grain bullets. And I had an example of one of the 350 grain bullets that was expanded after penetrating through, I believe it was ballistic gelatin that they used on this. It had 3 petals and they opened up 4 times the diameter of the original bullet shank. Really impressive. As many said, it looks like a grappling hook or a treble hook that you'd go snagging fish with. So it got a lot of comments in pro and con. Let's read some of those. This is OG Punisher 47. He's needling me. He says, "Hey Ron, blaming a breeze for those huge groups at under 50 meters? Okay, buddy." And he has a point. What we were doing with this rifle is just taking some 50-yard shots with these subsonic bullets only going about 1,050 feet per second. This is not a long-range setup, guys. And so we were shooting at 50 yards, and we're not getting the best groups in the world, but I noticed some horizontal stringing, and I thought, well, it might be the wind. And he is pointing out, come on, that big, heavy bullet at 50 yards, that group size shouldn't have been that much influenced by the wind. And he is probably right. I was probably looking for an excuse to make myself look better. But this was a new rifle. We had just begun shooting it, and you can probably blame me, but we're going to be doing more work with this. This was that newfangled Q-Fix bolt-action rifle that looks a lot like an AR-15, but isn't. It really is a unique design, and it takes a little bit of getting used to. But one of the things that it does is it handles these subsonic calibers or cartridges like the 8.6 Blackout, which has applications that a lot of people just don't quite understand. They're like, what the heck? Why would anybody pick a 338 that's only going 1,050 feet per second or so with a 300 grain bullet? We're going back to muzzleloader days. We're back to the 1850s, for Pete's sake. And that's true, but for a reason. What they want to do with these subsonic loads, of course, is to shoot where you don't make a lot of noise. And some people will say, well, that's great for getting multiple shots in, say, on a sounder of feral pigs that you're trying to control. You want to get more shots done before they spook. And that is one good reason to use it. But another one is if you're hunting in what is becoming increasingly more and more settled country, and you don't want complaints about the gunfire from people, the neighbors, several hundred yards over or wherever they are, it just seems like there's a lot of people who would like to hunt in their backyard 40, 20, even 10 acres and not make a lot of noise. And because it's a fairly small territory, you're shooting game inside of 100 yards, this cartridge is working a lot like a 30-30 would, but with a lot less report. Put a suppressor on the front of it, tames it down even more. So that's kind of what's going on there, guys. They're using a heavy bullet to make up for the decreased velocity. Let's see what Marvin Brock has to say about it. He says, the irony. This 8.6 is the equivalent, but not quite, but close enough to the good old 4570 black powder load that slayed the West 200 years ago. Now, I'm not poking fun here. I just love seeing the classics come back around. And yes, I know this one is suppressed and the 4570 isn't. Well, it could be. But this is the point I was just making, and you made it well, Marvin. We are really going back to the 4570 cartridge of 1873. We're getting the same basic performance from similar bullet weights, similar velocities and all, back in the black powder days. But again, it's quiet. All right, let's see. Michael McKellar says, but at such low velocity, can these 8.6 bullets go deep enough to hit the vitals even at 50 yards? That's a typical range for a woods shot on deer. Well, yeah, you certainly can. In fact, the next comment from Camcom says the 8.6 is spinning 10 times faster than the 30-06, so it's basically a drill bullet. You should look up ballistic tests on it. It's actually so crazy, they will go through 3 blocks of ballistic gelatin, no problem. So he answered it for me there, Michael. Michael says, can they hit the vitals of a deer at 50 yards? Remember, 350 grain bullet at 1,050 feet per second or so. That's not very fast, but there's a lot of momentum in the mass of that bullet. And that's what they were doing back in the 45-70 days. So that definitely can penetrate. Remember, 45-70, they were taking bison with that. So you're getting a lot of penetration. I forgot to mention that drill effect. I don't know if it's an actual drilling effect, but it's pretty close, because the 8.6 Blackout has a twist rate in the rifling of the barrel of 1 in 3 inches. So every 3 inches, your bullet is making 1 complete revolution. You drive that out there, at, even if it's only going 900 feet per second, you're doing a lot of spinning. So you're getting the petals on that expanded bullet that stick out so far are sort of acting like, I guess, a drill bit or a common mixer in the kitchen. It's spinning around as it chews its way through. I heard from a gentleman the other day who said a friend of his had shot a deer with a high shoulder shot, and it tore it up so bad it really ruined a lot of meat, which makes sense when you've got a bullet that expands 4 times its original diameter, plus the spinning. Yeah, you're going to do some meat damage. You want to put that bullet behind the shoulder through the ribs and the lungs. That's where you're going to have some really effective terminal performance without ruining much meat. So, yeah, a lot of new things to be considered and understood about this subsonic stuff with bigger bullets. I think it'll be considerable interest in the future, especially as they become more and more settled and there are more and more reasons to shoot quietly and still be effective at woods ranges. All right, let's see. Now, here's another one on the 8.6 from Ron Dickinson. He says, that's a goofy bullet. Come on, Ron, you can do better. I think you're selling out. No, Ron, I'm not selling out. And yeah, it looks like a goofy bullet, but as I've been explaining, it does something, and it does it very well. Now, I've got to admit, this is secondhand as far as terminal performance because I have not taken game with it yet. But I am going to be hunting feral pigs in Texas this winter, and I'll use that. And I have a better report for exactly what that did. We're going to be making some ham and a bunch of sausage with some of these pigs down there. And I'm just excited to see how effective this subsonic is. I'm hoping to be able to take 1, 2, 3, or 4 pigs out of a sounder before they wise up. And we'll see if all that stuff works. But no, these aren't goofy bullets. I mean, anytime someone shows me a bullet that is designed to expand to 4 times its original diameter, I'm pretty interested in that for game hunting. All right, now we did another video on the easy way to zero your rifle. And in it, we explained about how you can zero if you do not have access to a range where you can shoot 100 yards. How do you zero your rifle for 100 yards or even farther if you can only, say, shoot at a target that's 25 or 30 yards away? So we did this video explaining how that can be done, and we got a lot of comments on that. And I think in that video, we also explained the 1-shot or the 2-shot zero, which involves dialing your scope to move it to where your rifle just put the bullet hole. So you aim at your target, you shoot, and on that target you see your bullet hole is 4 inches to the left and 3 inches high. You put the rifle back in the same cradle, aiming at the same bullseye, and you hold it there. You lock it in position so it cannot move, and then you turn the turrets on the scope, and you watch the reticle move up until it's over the bullet hole. And now the barrel is pointing to where the bullet went, and now the scope is also pointing to where the bullet went, and you've just zeroed your rifle. Pretty darn close. Works quite well. So we heard from a lot of people on this one. Here is one called Senior on 2 Wheels. I am 68 years old, and I have been shooting for over 55 years. Talk about teaching an old dog new tricks. Thank you for these new tricks. Well, you're most welcome, Senior. Here is Steve Miller. He says he's 62 years old, and this was the best tutorial that he's seen yet. Thank you. Well, you are welcome too, Stephen. Betsy, I'm scoring with these guys.
Very good.
Now, here's John Smith. And John says this is a great method with a couple of conditions that have to be considered. First, Many shooters can't shoot a group off the bench if their life depended on it. So if they start adjusting after one shot, they're going to chase their tail until they run out of ammo and go home frustrated. You have to prove that you can shoot a group, or you cannot trust one bullet hole to represent where the rifle is actually shooting. Second consideration is that while this method of zeroing is great for getting a rifle real close to the zero you want, you should still never hunt with it until you can actually fire a few shots at the actual zero range to verify what you actually have. The animals we hunt deserve that. Well, that is a good point, John. I'm not sure I'm agreeing with you 100% here because, in all honesty, there are so many folks out there in settled country that just cannot get access to a longer range to take those shots. And if you are a careful shot and you make that 25 or 30 yard sight-in distance, that means your bullet isn't really rising except for that your barrel is pointing it up in relation to your scope sight. So I can show you guys this with a couple of cartridges. If this is your barrel and the scope sits on top of your barrel, the scope essentially gets tipped down to see through the line of departure of your bullet. The bullet's flight path is being intersected by the visual path through your scope. So you're looking actually down through it. This results in your rifle being tilted slightly uphill. Throw your bullet onto the target at range because the bullet immediately starts to drop when it's shot. When it leaves the muzzle, gravity begins pulling it. It gets pretty far down range before it pulls it very far down, but it is pulling it at the same speed as if you would just drop it from the muzzle. So the scope then allows that barrel to be pointed up in the air, launches it through the line of sight at about 25 yards. That's where your zero is, at 25. Then you just need to determine where's that bullet falling back down through the visual path of the sight. And that could be 100 yards or 200 yards or 300 yards, depending on the speed of your bullet, the ballistic coefficient of your bullet, and those sorts of things. And you can get that data with an online ballistic calculator. Go in there and crunch the numbers, and if you know the muzzle velocity of your bullet and its BC, you put those in and then say, I want to zero it at 25 yards. It will run those numbers and say, okay, if you're zeroed at 25 yards, your bullet is going to be 2.5 inches or 3 inches high at 100 yards and 2 inches low or 4 inches low at 300 yards, etc., etc. Then you can double check that, as John suggests. That is ideal. But for the guys who just need to get their rifle sighted before deer season, and they're probably only going to be shooting out to 100 yards or maybe 200, boy, a 25-yard or 30-yard zero is going to keep you inside of the vitals of a deer with just about every cartridge out there from the muzzle out to 200 yards. So it's a valid approach. Obviously, you're right. It's not ideal. Ideal would be to see if it is indeed printing 2.5 inches high at 100 and how high or low at 250 and et cetera, et cetera. The more you know, the more competent shooter you are. But you are correct that our animals, the animals that we're hunting, deserve for us to be really effective shots. You don't want to be just throwing a hope and a prayer out there. Shotgunning approach is not recommended for taking a deer. You want the rifleman's approach. One shot, one kill. All right, now more stuff on the AI Overrated cartridges video we did. This is from Nathan Schooley. The overrated thing is the amount of debate we have on different calibers. With the right bullet and shot placement, most calibers will get the job done. And it looks like Robert Watson is agreeing with Nathan. He says, the quality of the projectile is the most important thing. And then Darren Fisher weighs in and says, absolutely spot on comment. Bullet placement outweighs caliber every time. A well-placed 7mm or 30 caliber will take game where a poorly placed shot from a .338 won't every day. Well, guys, that's all true. You know, you're absolutely right. And we harp on that on this channel all the time. Betsy.
We have another AI video coming up. I think it's called Underrated.
Underrated, yes. We did overrated and got such a good response. We did another one on underrated cartridges. You guys are going to want to check in on that one and find out what AI thinks is an inadequate cartridge. That should get a lot of comment too. But what these guys are saying about bullet placement is, of course, true, and we harp on it a lot. It doesn't matter so much if your bullet weighs 50 grains and you shot it, it's a 22 caliber. If you put it in the heart, come on, it's a hole in the heart. You've torn the vital organs that are required to keep that animal alive. Same with putting it in the lungs. But if you put it in just a piece of meat back at the ham, that's not going to do you a heck of a lot of good, but neither would the 338 Win Mag in that particular point. So it's always about getting that bullet into the vitals. Now, it is significant that the bullet can reach the vitals, meaning it's not just shooting flat and accurately, but it has the mechanical structure to penetrate to those vitals, discombobulate them, and ideally exit to leave another hole, increases your chances for effective blood trailing. Now, for those of you who still think you can get a big enough cartridge with a big enough bullet, and here I am holding aloft a 416 Rigby with a 400 grain bullet atop of it. Yeah, that's a bigger hole than, say, this little 6.5 Creedmoor I'm holding up with a longer, skinnier bullet. But again, either one of those is going to do the job if that bullet opens up and penetrates, getting into the vitals. So that's what you want to look for. And we always say you should pay more attention to the bullet than the cartridge. And it's really crazy. It's been going on for a long time, as long as I've been around. We always talk about a big enough gun, an adequate gun, or a superior gun. And this was made famous back in the 50s by Robert Rourke. And he even titled his book, Use Enough Gun. And of course, I think everyone understands by gun, he means the whole fixture, not just the particular firearm, but the cartridge that's in it and the bullet and all the rest. But I think it does make it so that people think, I've got to get the Remington Model 788 that I saw this guy use one time when he shot a deer, and it collapsed right there in its tracks. It was dead right there. And it was a 788 Remington chambered for the 6mm Remington. That's got to be the best because I saw it work so well. Well, it's not the rifle, and it's not the 6mm Remington. It was the bullet and where that bullet went. But we don't go out and say, sell me a rifle that puts the bullet where it's supposed to go every time. We've got to pick it by the cartridge and the kind of rifle. So choose your rifle based on what fits you and works for your style of hunting, feels good, it's ergonomic, and then get your cartridge fitting so that you know it is putting enough energy into a bullet to get it there. And the bullet's then designed to penetrate the animal. So really concentrate on that bullet. Doesn't matter if it was launched from a 30-30 or a 300 Win Mag or a 30-378 Weatherby Magnum. It's still a 30 caliber bullet. That doesn't change. But how does the velocity from those cartridges change what that bullet does when it gets there? You can choose a bullet that's designed to give you perfect performance from the high velocity 30-378 Magnum. Then you can choose a different bullet that's still a 30 caliber that's going to perform properly out of a 30-30 and its lower velocities. It's the bullet. So good points, guys. The right bullet in the right place wins every time. Now, here's Third Law Pair commenting on this topic, says, yep, it's not like any of these folks that are arguing over the right cartridges have ever seen a bullet bounce off of a deer and then watch that deer walk off unscathed. I got to throw a curveball at you there, Third Law. I actually did see this. It was on a video, but it was a friend of mine. Oh, it was probably 20 years ago. He was doing a TV show, so he had the cameraman, and he was filming in slow motion. And my friend shoots a deer with a muzzle loader. I don't remember the caliber or anything. I think he was using a sabot, so he probably had a 50 with a 458 or 452 caliber bullet in a sabot or something like this. At any rate, the video captured this bullet hitting the side of a whitetail, looked like it right on the shoulder, and you could see it in slow motion bouncing off. And the deer ran away, and he never found a blood trail. He never found the deer. And his conclusion was, I think I just bounced one off of a deer. And from the video that I saw, it certainly looked like it. I didn't want to believe it. I looked at it many, many times, and I finally said, I'm afraid you're right, Bill. It appears to have bounced off. How could that even happen? We never figured it out. We don't know how it could happen, but I often say, never say always and never say never when it comes to hunting and shooting game animals. Crazy stuff can happen and sometimes does. And that was literally a case of the bullet bouncing off the deer. Whew. All right. Now, here's something else about this AI, artificial intelligence, from Quentin. This is what the world needs to know about artificial intelligence. It is misnamed. It should more accurately be called artificial stupidity. Well, that may be a little bit much, Quentin, but I kind of get your drift. I think some people are perhaps giving to AI a little more credit than it deserves. But I think we are going to discover, based on the research I've done on this and the little bit I know about it, AI is going to be a big, big force in all of our lives here pretty soon. Maybe not so much with choosing the right cartridges for deer hunting and that kind of thing, but when it comes to compiling a lot of scientific information and then getting access to it quickly and applying it properly, it seems like it's going to be able to do some pretty remarkable things. On one hand, it's a little bit scary. On the other hand, it sounds kind of promising for really increasing the quality of life if we as humans can just learn how to properly utilize it. All right, now there's something on flattest shooting cartridges by caliber. This video is probably 2 years old, but it just keeps churning. We're getting close to 2 million views on it because I think a lot of people are, like me, interested in that kind of thing. We've always talked about what's the most powerful cartridge out there, and what's the fastest, what's the most efficient, all these different categories, which are kind of fun to dive into that stuff because I always say the more you learn, the more you know, the smarter you are. And if nothing else, you can at least win some bar arguments about trivia. So we did this checking all the different cartridges to figure out which one actually did shoot the flattest, and we did it by cartridge or by caliber. It was by caliber. So in 22 caliber, which one shot the flattest? In 24 caliber, which one? In 30 caliber, which one? And came up with, I can't remember the winners in every category, but of course we got a lot of comments from folks on this. And Don Hearn here said, I would have bet that it would have been the 220 Swift or the 6.5 by 300 Weatherby Magnum, because they both go far very quickly, and time is a component of bullet drop. When I was a kid, a fellow at our range had a 220 Swift, and he sold me on that round. I never owned one, but I always wanted one. Well, flash forward to this past week, and I was out specking for my next rifle. I was close to getting a 6.5 by 300 Weatherby Magnum, but it just did not seem very practical to me. I don't hunt. I shoot paper as a hobby when I do shoot, so I decided that a 300 PRC would be better. But I might regret not going with a 6.5 300 one day. He's saying I might regret not going with the 6.5 300 the same way I now miss not going with that 220 Swift. So he gets excited about a cartridge and then he doesn't quite buy into it enough to actually buy the rifle. And he gets something else and then he regrets it. So he thinks he may be doing that again with the 6.5 by 300. Yeah, Weatherby's 6.5 by 300 I think won the 264 category of bullet, because it uses a 300 Weatherby case to push a .264-inch diameter bullet instead of a .308 diameter bullet. You can imagine how much velocity that thing is getting. And that's the key. How fast does it shoot, and what's the bullet weight? The lighter the bullet, the faster it shoots, and the farther it goes before it drops, and there's your flattest shooting cartridge in each of them. You can change that a little bit with some of the bullet sizes and shapes and different things, but it's generally the rule. Yeah, the fastest out to about 1,000 yards, and then the heavier bullets will start retaining a little more energy and shoot a little bit flatter at long distances, but at reasonable target distances and certainly hunting distances, the fastest ones are the flattest shooting. All right. Oh, now here's a common mistake a lot of people made on this one. is that they had preconceived notions about which were flat shooting cartridges. The 220 Swift came up a lot. They've always heard that it was the flattest, so they assumed it was. But a lot of people have heard that the 6.5 Creedmoor is such a great long-range cartridge that it must be the flattest. And it's not even close. Not even close. That one became famous for target shooting because of the high BC bullets that it fired, which minimized its wind deflection. That's what helped it win long-range shooting competitions, not its drop, because it drops a lot. And the drop, of course, is compensated by knowing your ballistic tables, your trajectory curves, because gravity is a constant. It pulls at 32 feet per second, accelerating 32 feet per second until it reaches terminal drop velocity. You're not going to get terminal drop velocity out of a cartridge before it gets well downrange. But the advantage with the long, high BC bullets is that wind resistance to getting deflected off course by crosswinds. So when you know you need to compensate for how many ever feet of drop at 800 or 1,000 yards, now you just need to be able to compensate for that 5 mile an hour or 10 mile an hour right angle wind that's pushing your bullet. And if your bullet resists that push, it's going to be a lot easier to hit your target. That's what made the 6.5 Creedmoor so famous. But a lot of people think also the 308 Winchester, it must be a flat shooting cartridge because it's used so much for target shooting. And here is one of those people. Skalvener says the 308 Winchester. No. Yeah, he's saying the 308 Winchester is the flattest shooting cartridge in the 30 calibers. People just like to tout the one and only caliber that they know. The psychology around firearms is as fascinating as the ballistics. Oh, he's not saying that. He's kind of making fun of them. Other people said the 308, and he is saying just because that's the only caliber you know, you think it's the fastest? And then he questions the psychology of people dealing with firearms, and he finds that as fascinating as the ballistics. Skalvener, I agree. This really is an interesting topic. Why is it that some people absolutely glom onto a cartridge and insist that it's the best for everything without any real evidence or experimentation suggesting there might be better options? I've told the story many times about the gentleman who approached me at a show I was doing, weekend consumer show, and he came up to me and said, I know the perfect deer cartridge, the best one in the world. I said, great, what is it? 30-30 Winchester. And why is that? Because it's killed every deer I've ever shot at, just right there. Wow, wonderful. How many have you shot? 2. And I stifled a chuckle, and then I said, how many other rifles and cartridges have you tried? None, because the 30-30 is the best. Why would I waste my time? That's the kind of one-sided argument here that doesn't really hold water, guys. You've got to do a little bit of experimenting. Try a few other options. Okay, let's see. Who's this? Kenbo. Oh, this is also on the fastest bullets. This is somebody, Kenbo, saying a 27-grain bullet and a cannonball both fall to the earth at the same rate. Obviously, the faster a bullet travels, the less it will fall at a given distance. Bingo. Kenbo has got the formula here for how you shoot a flat cartridge. You give it enough speed, and it gets downrange in a hurry before gravity can pull it at its 32 feet per second per second. So if it takes a bullet exactly 1 second to get 1,000 yards, it would be pulled to the ground at 32 feet per second. You'd think it would be 32 feet. Except for that first second, you need acceleration. It starts off at 0, and it's being pulled at a 32 feet per second energy level, call it, but it can't be going 32 feet per second. It's maybe only going 16 or 18 because it's picking up its velocity being pulled to the ground. But meanwhile, its downrange velocity is slowing down as well, but it's reaching its target in 1 second, so it's probably going to be 18 inches under it or something like that. I don't know exactly how to figure that stuff out. That's what ballistic calculators can do for you guys. But this guy understands it. It's how fast the bullet gets there, because gravity is always constant. So the faster the bullet gets to the target, the less you're going to have for drop, and the flatter it's going to shoot. Pretty cool stuff. Basic physics, I guess.
I like his explanation better than yours.
I do too. And when I listened to myself say that, I thought, boy, I should have just read Kenbo and shut up.
Because it confused me.
He had me convinced, and then I unconvinced myself. Oh, man. How about Gary Carpenter? Gary, I hope you got something smart to say too, because I don't. Gary says, I had a 370-yard bow kill with an arrow. I won't even release an arrow unless the buck is on a dead run. But that's just me. Some people have accused me of being a liar. I am here to confirm this. That's funny. That's worth another read. He says, I had a 317-yard bow kill. I won't even release an arrow unless the buck is on a dead run, but that's just me. Some people have accused me of being a liar. I'm here to confirm this. That's the kind of humor we like around here, guys. There's an honest gentleman. Boy, those were great, guys. I want to thank all of you for writing in. I want to thank our patrons, of course, for supporting us. We had a great meeting last night with our Tier 3 and higher patrons. This is a great group of guys. We had a couple of new ones come on board, and we welcomed them in. Glad to have them. Ethan from Kentucky was out guiding elk hunters. The Kentucky elk season is on, and Ethan was cluing us in and saying, you know, we, of course, didn't have elk in Kentucky for a long time. Daniel Boone found them when he came, but the pioneers kind of cleaned them out back in the market hunting days. But they were reintroduced back in the late 70s, I believe.
No,
and
90s.
90s, was it?
94.
94, he said they brought them in, and that herd is now built up to where they can have hunting seasons and take some good bulls and control things, and that's exciting. You know, a lot of exciting things with nature and wildlife have happened in the last 100 years, and one of the big ones is after the pioneer era, where all the forests were cut down to make farms and stuff. People had to live. You know, you can't go out and eat a pine cone. So they cut a lot of forests down. We had some significant deforestation back in those days. But that has now grown up, and we've got now some pretty significantly dense and tall second growth forests that are being much more better managed today than they ever were. And then we've got this mix of little farm fields and pastures in with those forests, which increases the edge component, which biology pretty much shows that more wildlife can live on edges than in one particular type of habitat. So you've got the edge of the forest and the edge of the pasture and the edge of a cornfield, and you got all these extra ingredients to help wildlife to survive and thrive. And we're seeing a lot of that. And I suspect that's what's happening in Kentucky. You do have your hardwood forests and ridges and hills along the rivers and toward the mountains, but you also have a lot of farm fields, and it's a good mix. And you can have not just the whitetail deer, for which Kentucky is famous, but now elk. Should have bison there, they used to, but there's an animal that is so big and so powerful that I don't think you can adequately control it. It'll walk through fences and get into crops and cause a lot of damage and get on the highways. You can imagine if you hit a deer on the highway at 70 miles an hour, what would happen if it was a 2,000-pound bison instead? Whew, baby. So probably not going to get a restoration of bison. But elk, kind of an in-between critter, and they stay mostly back in the forests. So as long as they can control the numbers to take care of damage in crop fields and stuff, I think they're going to continue to have a good population. And then another animal that's coming back in the east and the south is the black bear. Similar story. They kind of wiped them out in the pioneer era, and settlement made sure they stayed away because you had your livestock and you couldn't have depredation. But now there are fewer and fewer people doing that old-fashioned farming, living off the land sort of thing. So you really don't have big problems with bears getting into the sheep pen or the pigs and all the stuff you were trying to raise on your farm. So now black bears are bouncing back, and they're actually doing wonderfully well everywhere. I did some research on them, and the black bear population is pretty much saturated in all suitable habitats, and they are thriving everywhere they've ever been in North America and fairly far down into Mexico, of course, up into Canada and up into Alaska. And their numbers are just about as high as they've ever been. So just a lot of great stories, and that's all a success because of the conservation programs that we have in the United States. That North American model of wildlife conservation we're always crowing about really works. And it works so well that we've been able to reintroduce wolves in many areas. They're problematic in those areas, but without the restoration of the deer and the elk and all the rest of the prey species, we would not have been able to bring back the wolves. So more credit to conservation hunters for all the work they've done.
And I also want to thank, we had another Patreon that joined us, Derek, and thank you.
Well, that's right. Derek came in for the first time, too. And Derek was from the wonderful state of California. He said it's not as bad as often made out to be, but still, he's done all of his hunting in other states. But he's going to be hunting up in the Trinity Mountains pretty soon for, I think, a black-tailed deer in California. But more power to you, Derek, for keeping the hunters' interests alive in the Golden State. Maybe we can make it golden for hunters once again. Okay, now Betsy has pulled up some comments from the Ron Spomer Outdoors website comment page. And the first of those comes from Oregon, and this is Colin. I used to have a cousin named Colin. Boy, did we have some fun back in the day. Colin says, hello, I am somewhat new to hunting. I'm on the market for a new rifle for use on my small farm of 20 acres. Didn't I tell you earlier that there were people hunting on this 20 acres and even 10 acres? Here is one of them, Colin. He continues, I will generally be shooting within 75 yards. I have deer, elk, lots of bear. Boy, you're singing my song here. Oh, also cougars, bobcats, and lots of coyotes. So I am set on wanting a Henry lever action 30-30. You have many videos justifying 30-30 for a deer rifle, but ethically, would it be useful on my farm with coyote, cougar, and bear problems? Oh, certainly the 30-30 is more than adequate for taking care of those animals if they're within range and you can hit them, obviously. Coyote's a fairly small target, but plenty of them have been taken with 30-30s, and inside of 75 yards, you should do just fine. The 30-30 is considered to be one of the finest balanced whitetail rifles in the business. Works just as well on mule deer and pronghorn, except for there you usually have longer ranges. Quite often, anyway, have longer ranges. And they'll work just as well on black bears. I've used them on those as well as pronghorn and whitetail and mule deer. So 30-30 has got a justifiably great reputation for being a great game getter.
Even though AI said no?
Even though what?
AI said no?
Yeah, don't pay any attention to AI on this one, guys. Artificial. Remember, artificial intelligence. So yeah, I'd say you could do just fine with that. Now, you might want to look into a scope sight. And I may be biased on this one because of my age again, but I just shoot so much better with a scope. But if you've got great eyesight and you can adequately hit your target with those open sights, go for it. But that Henry 30-30 is a well-respected rifle that can certainly do the job. So, yeah, you'll do well with that. Good luck, Colin. Someday I'd like to see your 20 acres. My goodness, cougars and bobcats and coyotes and deer and elk on 20 acres. Love it. All right, this is Steve, and he just says he's from the USA. That's good enough for me. Say, Ron, on one of your podcasts, could you please talk about how to always check the twist rate used in the reloading data? I have seen too many people that don't check this, and they load, for example, two different 223 Remington chambered rifles. One may be a slow twist, like 1 in 12 for light bullets, but then they try to shoot those same loads in an AR-15 with a 1 in 7 twist. Please cover how this can result in possibly dangerous pressures in the faster twist. Also, how those light bullets could spin apart in the fast twist. And I heard people say, well, that's what the load data says, and they never checked what the twist rate was compared to that load data. So thanks. I love your videos, Steve. Yeah, Steve, good point there. Guys, when you're loading, it does pay to know the twist rate of your rifle because some 223 rifles or 5.56, it's the same cartridge pretty much, and they can be interchanged if your twist rates are right and your throats are set up right for the longer bullets. In other words, with a 5.56, you generally have a 1 in 7 twist, fast twist barrel, and then they'll load some really heavy long bullets in there, and you've got to seat them out properly so they're not slamming into the lands. When you hand load, you do all of this stuff. You tweak everything to to perfection, essentially. That's why hand loads are usually more accurate than factory loads. But one of the things to look for is your twist rate. So if you want to shoot a heavy bullet, make sure you have a fast enough twist in your rifling to stabilize that bullet. Generally, the old 223s were 1 in 12 twist. Maybe some of them were 1 in 10. But the 5.56s and some of the new 223s would be twisted 1 in 7 or 1 in 9 to handle the longer bullets. So as a rough rule, 223, figure your bullets are going to go to 55 grains, maybe a 60 grain bullet at the upper end. And then when you get to the 60 to 69 to 77 grain bullets in a 22, you're probably going to have it chambered for the 5.56. So you just need to know that. What is it chambered for, and how far out can you seat your bullets, and will your rifling stabilize that bullet? And as Steve said, some of those lighter bullets, the varmint bullets, can be spun apart at high twist rates. The bullet is just spinning so far that it works like fudge on a spatula or a mixer spinning around, and it throws pudding everywhere. That happens kind of to your bullet. The bullet is so lightly jacketed that the solid or the pure soft lead core literally spins apart when it comes down through that rifling. All right, Brian from California. Hey, Ron, no questions but a compliment. Oh, boy. Your podcast, episode 428, Alaska Grizzly Hunt, was a masterclass in storytelling. Well, I'll be darned. Thank you for that, Brian. I don't even remember that one, but Alaska Grizzly Hunt. It was beautiful, from the effortless poetry of your adventure to the humorous diversions along the way. I had a good fortune of listening to this episode one morning while driving an hour or so for work through misty fog and rolling hills. The drive itself was scenic, although I found myself transported thousands of miles away to Alaska on more than one occasion. I could almost smell the spruce, the lodge, and the boggy mud, all narrated by your warm and gentle voice. Put a smile on my face all day. Thank you. Wow. Thank you, Brian. I didn't know I had that kind of an impact. P.S. Okay, I lied. I do have a question. All right, let's get to it. The podcast studio is very aesthetic. What lens do you use? The millimeter of lens, f-stop, etc. And what does your lighting setup consist of? I imagine your characteristic hat poses some challenges in keeping your face well lit. Thanks again, Brian. Very astute observations, Brian. Yes, indeed. I have a light right over here and one up here to give me a little quasi-rim light and light up the sides a little bit, and then a big soft light up here that looks like about 3 feet across. And that pretty much bounces enough light up under here. I do have to watch the hat brim so I don't get that shadow look like this. But nothing too special. As for the camera, it's an old Lumix Panasonic G. Is it a 9 or 11, honey? I don't even remember.
I think it's a 9. We've had it for years.
Yeah, and it's a micro. It's not the full format. It's an old micro. I got it years ago as a lightweight travel kit because it had a 100 to 400 zoom lens that was really small. And it worked great for a while, but then the zoom lens went goofy, and I've never sent the darn thing in to get it fixed again, partly because we mounted this body with a shorter lens on a tripod back there, and we just leave it. It's a studio camera now. We never take it anywhere else. It has a lot of capabilities that I'm not utilizing, but it's just convenient for us to leave it up here all the time. What's the lens on that? A 28 to 130 or 125 or something in that range?
12 to 60, I think.
Yeah. At any rate, it's a zoom, and we just zoom it up to frame things the way we would like. And there's nothing special up here. We put up some old barn wood to give this place some character, and bingo, that's what it is. We change the background pictures every once in a while, hang some furs up, throw up a skull or something, some antlers and different things, but try to mix it up and keep it interesting. But appreciate you noticing that, Brian. An f-stop or whatever, we're generally shooting at f8. Want to have a little bit, because sometimes we'll demonstrate cartridges in front of ourselves and things, so we'll focus there, and then we get enough depth of field to carry to the background. And the ISO is our biggest challenge. We have to really crank that up because these lights aren't all that powerful. So we're usually shooting at 1600 to 2500 ISO, and that's about it. So thanks for your interest. Hope that helped you out. And thanks so much for those fine compliments. Podcast episode 428, Alaska Grizzly Hunt.
That was on our Alaska hunt. We did a podcast on the grizzly bear that you shot.
This was the first grizzly I took up in Alaska many years ago.
Oh.
When I was way up at Unalakleet, as the locals pronounce it. Yeah, that was a early spring hunt with some snow patches around, and I saw the tracks of the grizzly bear going down through the snow, and I followed those tracks because they were so obvious. I thought I might as well track them from here. It's a couple hundred yards away, but I could see it. I'll just see where they go, and then went right to the sleeping grizzly bear. Got pretty exciting then. All right, let's go to Idaho. Well, we're already in Idaho, so we'll just stay here and talk to Tom. Hey, Ron, I've been hearing that the 300 WSM is dying in popularity and that the 6.5 Western, no, there's a 6.8 Western, he's meant, is also people are losing interest in it. So since I have both of these and I have used them for deer and elk, I'm wondering if I should be concerned. Thanks, Tom. No, Tom, I don't think you should be concerned, although you might want to stock up on some ammo. The 300 WSM is kind of a standard. It's been around since 2000. And it is just as effective as the 300 Win Mag, only it's a short action, of course. One of the first short fats, and I think it's going to always be with us. There are many, many rifles and lots of brands loading the ammo for it. It will probably wane in popularity, I think, because so many hunters now are going to sub-calibers, we'll call them. The 7s and the 6.5s especially. There have been so many developments there, and people are realizing that those calibers with the right bullet are just as effective at taking game, and there's less recoil. So a lot of folks like that. But I don't think we're ever going to lose completely the 30s. They're an American institution, really, from the 30 on up. So I think your 300 WSM is going to stick around. And I think the 6.8 is not losing, it's gaining interest. More and more people are recognizing that 6.8 Western is pretty much as effective as a 7 mag. And again, it's in the short, fat cartridge. So that one I think is going to slowly increase in popularity. So I don't think you need to be too concerned about either. But if you or anyone else out there is concerned that your particular cartridge is not getting a lot of love and it's sort of fading away, buy a whole bunch of ammo for it or start hand loading. You know, the sweet thing about hand loading, guys, is that you never run out of ammo. You'll have your cases, and then you just need to buy primers, powder, and bullets, put them all together, and you're shooting. You constantly keep shooting. There are guys hand-loading cartridges that pretty much went obsolete 50, 60 years ago, 80 years ago. But if you got the right components, you just can keep loading those things. All right, Pennsylvania, Carl. I hunt Pennsylvanian whitetail, black bear. I'm looking for an ideal dual-purpose bullet. My go-to has been the 150 grain Nosler partition. That is a good go-to. But I'm now contemplating trying the Barnes TTSX. Any thoughts on a bullet weight in the Barnes, or should I just stay with the tried and true partition? Well, you can't go wrong for those two species in Pennsylvania with that Nosler partition. That thing has been a remarkable bullet since 1948. But it is a bit dated in its shape and design. You get a little higher BC with some different designs and shapes. A really good replacement for it is Nosler's own AccuBond. That is a bonded bullet with a sleeker profile, higher BC. But if you're not shooting out, say, 300 yards and beyond, it's not going to make a heck of a lot of difference there. But as far as the copper bullet, that Barnes TTSX, you're going to be able to shoot a slightly lighter bullet and get the same performance, terminal performance, as you would with the 150. So I would go with 130 grain tipped triple shock and expect to get equal or better penetration and good expansion. The TTSXs have always reliably expanded and probably retained 90 to even 100% of their weight. Unless they hit a major bone with one of the pedals, they will keep all of the pedals on and retain 100% of their weight. but even if they shear a petal, they still have plenty of mass to continue penetrating. Generally expect to shoot through broadside on a whitetail and black bear with that bullet. So yeah, I would try that if I were you. I've also found that they are wonderfully accurate in almost every rifle I try them in. Those TTX bullets are just TTSX, tipped triple shock X bullet from Barnes. Top-notch stuff. You might want to give them a try. Okay, Dennis from Indiana. Is there a point of diminishing returns on a barrel length for a .22 long rifle? I saw barrels for the Ruger 1022 that were 24 and 28 inches. Thank you. Wow. Yeah, Dennis, there certainly is. Years ago, somebody did a bunch of research on that, and they figured out, I think the ideal length on a .22 long rifle was 16 and a half inches. After that, you don't gain any velocity, and then eventually you're going to start losing a little bit. So other than a longer sight picture for open sights, there's no advantage in a longer barrel in a .22. Where you could say it gets the report, the muzzle blast further away from your ear. Not that there's a lot in a .22, but there is enough there to do damage. I think it's around 140 decibels of crack from a .22 long rifle, believe it or not. And that is enough that OSHA would say that it could damage your hearing, especially if you have a lot of shots. And a lot of folks with .22s, of course, shooting up a brick for recreational plinking and target shooting in a single session, that's a lot of rounds going bang, 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 and get your ears ringing. So it's worth considering toning things down there. And a 24, 28-inch barrel would help a little bit with that. But a simpler way is just put your ear protection on and you're going to be just fine. But if you want to maximize, optimize the velocity of your .22 bullets, somewhere in that 16 and a half to 18-inch range would be pretty much just right. Okay, Walter from Kentucky. I am wanting to do all rifle. I'm wanting a do-it-all rifle that shoots the 7mm bullet. Okay, 7mm do-everything cartridge. What should it be? I already have the 7mm 08 Remington. I'm now stuck between the 270 Winchester and the 7mm Remington Magnum. Currently, 300 yards will be the longest hunting shot, and whitetail is the target. I do dream of someday hunting the West and going for elk. That's my dream anyway, so which 7mm do you recommend? Well, you're doing really well with that 708, but you can get a little flatter shooting, a little longer reach with a 7-rem mag. That's one I recommend. That doesn't mean there aren't equally good ones. The 280 Ackley Improved is right in between those two, so that one's a good option. And any of the faster 7s could be darn good too. The 7 PRC was initially touted as an equal to the 7-rem mag. It will shoot longer bullets more efficiently because it's already set up from the factory for that, but it won't get quite that velocity because they lost the initial powder that they worked with designing this thing. Can't seem to find a powder that will give the same sort of performance. So you're going to be shooting a little more slowly with the 7 PRC, but those highly efficient long bullets make it a darn good performer at longer ranges. And then you've got all kinds of 7s that are faster, like the 28 Nosler and the 7mm Remington Ultra Magnum and the STW. And, well, if you guys want to know all about 7mm, of course, my book covers all of them. And there are over 60 of them in here. So you check that out and you'll find all about how it was designed and what bullets it shoots the best and the velocities and the energies and all the rest of it. Pretty interesting stuff, and you can order those through our website, ronspomeroutdoors.com. And I would suggest that you take a hard look at the 7-rem mag. I'm biased. That's kind of my pick. Been that way for a long, long time. One of its advantages, of course, is that everybody loads ammunition for it. So if you're not a hand loader, you're going to find probably the load that's just perfect for your rifle. Okay, thanks for that one. And that looks like it's the end of the road for us. Betsy, do you have anything else to add to this broadcast? Nope. Boy, that's really wrapping it up in a hurry. Guys, Betsy doesn't want to talk to you today. I thought she'd have something big to say about her new 6mm Creedmoor. She's all excited about. Now she woke up.
Yes, my new fix, 6.5 Creedmoor.
What happened that made you all so excited about it now?
Well, we got a suppressor for
That
it.
suppressor came in. She loves shooting that thing with a suppressor. Well, she hasn't actually shot this one with a suppressor. She hunted with a borrowed one that had the suppressor, and that's where she fell in love. So she likes this 6-pound rifle. We put a suppressor on the front. Now it weighs 6 pounds, 12 ounces. And it's a little bit front heavy for her, but she's still eager to get out and try it. And she's thinking that might be her new deer hunting rifle, and she wants to take it to Texas and see if she could maybe address a few of those feral pigs over there. So Betsy is fired up about her Q-Fix 6.5 Creedmoor. I hope you guys are all fired up about whatever your pet rifle is for this hunting season. If you're like me, it's a new rifle every season, but I'm going back to the good old 757 single shot. This will be my, third season with it, and I am still in love with that beautiful piece of machinery, and I'm going to be shooting that at a couple of whitetail this year. But then I'll experiment with some of the new stuff, and I'll help out Betsy with her 6.5 Creedmoor and all the rest of it. We're just going to continue to have fun with everything and anything that comes through. And there's a lot of them coming through, so stay tuned. We're going to have some new rifles reviews here coming up real quick on Ron Spomer Outdoors YouTube. Thanks for listening into the podcast. Wishing you all a successful hunting season. This is the season. October is the glory month, and it's coming right up. See you next time. Hunt honest and shoot straight.